Recording.
Great. Thank you so much, Ellie, and happy to be here. Hi to everybody who has logged on, and hope you're having a great day today. I'm here to talk with you about MassTimber. We're going to do a little kind of MassTimber 101, then we'll talk about some contexts and opportunities related to MassTimber in Michigan, as well as a little bit more broadly, and then bring it back to maybe some new research and ideas that might help members of MFA think about how they might engage with MassTimber opportunities. As Ellie said, my name is Sandra Lupien. I lead a program at Michigan State University called MassTimber at MSU. And I think some of you who are logged on might already be familiar with the program, but probably most of you are not. So this is a program, it's a collaboration across MSU's Department of Forestry, the School of Planning, Design, and Construction, specifically the Construction Management Program, and then MSU Extension. And we work with a variety of partners, I would say especially with the Michigan Department of Natural Resources, but also with a broad and growing network of people in the architecture, engineering, and construction industry, forestry and forest products industry, policymakers, et cetera. And we do all the things that MSU as a land grant university does: research, teaching, and extension. And we can talk about that as stakeholder engagement, outreach, kind of building a community of practice. That's kind of how that extension works, to create a reality in which we have more MassTimber buildings going up in Michigan, and then also and especially to help put together the demand and the pieces of the puzzle, including the supply chain and the workforce, to create MassTimber production in Michigan using Michigan wood, including wood from all land ownership, all forest land ownership types. So that's kind of where we're coming from, and I'll talk more about like the why behind that and some of the what as we move ahead. But first, MassTimber. I bet most of you know what MassTimber is. At the same time, there are many people who do not, or think I always, no matter what I think people's level of knowledge of MassTimber is, I always start by defining it so that people understand what I mean when I say MassTimber and what most of us mean when we say MassTimber. This is an umbrella term for a variety of really big engineered wood building construction materials that we can use in ways that we've historically used steel or concrete to build large buildings, including skyscrapers. So by using this engineered type of wood, as opposed to wood like a column or beam from a single sawn log, the aggregate strength and stiffness and resilience allows us to build big buildings with wood in ways that we've never been able to do before. Some MassTimber. Some types of MassTimber: glue laminated timber. This one, you probably have seen it. You know what it is. You've seen it maybe in someone's custom home. You've seen it in the Superior Dome at Northern Michigan University. Maybe you've seen it in a church. But these are columns and beams made by putting together layers of dimensional lumber, typically 2x4s, sometimes 1x. The layers are each in the same direction as the one next to it, so in the direction of the wood grain. And then there's adhesive between each layer, and then the column, gigantic column or beam, is put into a hydraulic press, and a significant amount of the air is just pressed right out of it, so that you have something that is extremely strong, extremely stable, and really, really rigid. So glue laminated timber. Cross-laminated timber, same idea, layers of dimensional lumber, adhesive, the hydraulic press. But here, two key things. One, these cross-laminated timber typically take the shape of panels, very large panels. For example, we have a building on campus where the panels are 3.5 stories high and 8 feet wide each. And these are made by putting the layers of dimensional lumber into a configuration such that each layer is in the opposite direction of the one next to it, so that you're creating a panel that is strong in the way that it can handle gravity, but then it can also start to provide the lateral resistance in a building. And lateral resistance is basically, in a very, very simplified explanation, the thing that makes a building not fall down in the wind or in an earthquake. And lateral resistance is the thing that we have not been able to achieve with wood in larger buildings before. So this is kind of like the groundbreaking type of MassTimber. Then we have mass plywood panels. These are similar to cross-laminated timber in their kind of configuration and shape, big gigantic panels. But here, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's plywood on steroids. It's layers of veneer plywood layered together. So the plywood sheets layered together to create a really, really strong panel. Then there's nail laminated timber. You've maybe seen this before. This one doesn't require adhesive. It doesn't require a large factory to make it. Here you're putting together dimensional lumber, kind of like books on a shelf. And then you're working with a structural engineer who tells you what the nailing pattern you need will be in order to use this panel or column or beam for the application that you want it. Sometimes we talk about mass timber in Michigan as a way to, like a lower barrier to entry way to demonstrate using Michigan wood in something called mass timber right now. So for example, there's a beautiful nail laminated timber feature wall in the building that the Michigan Department of Natural Resources recently opened in Newberry that shows how you can use Michigan red pine in this beautiful large wall panel that was made on the project site. So it's a cool way to do mass timber. Dowel laminated timber. Here we've got wooden dowels instead of nails and instead of glue. And then laminated veneer lumber. You've probably seen this. It's usually columns and beams, again, made of layers of veneer. Those are kind of some of the most common types of mass timber, but with the glue laminated timber or glulam and cross laminated timber or CLT being the most widely used at this point. So now I just want to start talking a little bit about the mass timber production cycle. So obviously it starts on forests. This is the part, like this is your place, your forest owners. You know that having a healthy and thriving forest products industry relies on us having healthy and thriving and resilient forests. So the whole cycle starts on the forest. Then we move to harvesting, to lumber milling and kilning. So again, most mass timber is made out of dimensional lumber. Some is made from veneers in any case that has to be milled and then dried to the appropriate moisture content. And then it moves into the manufacturing cycle. And this is when it starts, turning into a new type of product. So in a manufacturing facility, you've got these like really mechanized and technologically advanced production lines and moving the dimensional lumber of the veneers through, applying adhesive, compressing, curing, all the things you need to do to make these columns and panels and beams. And we'll call what happens in the manufacturing cycle producing kind of blanks. So just like columns and panels and beams, that aren't yet ready to become a building. That's the part that happens in the fabrication cycle. So now we're moving from manufacturing to fabrication. A fabrication facility takes those blanks, those columns and panels and beams, and working with architectural drawings and a lot of computerized technology, including, some computer assisted design, but then we've got saws and drills that are, computer operated, and, you just plug the design in and you do all of this amazing technologically advanced fabrication that turns those blanks into a prefabricated kit of parts that then is delivered to the construction site to be assembled in a way that can be incredibly efficient because of this prefabricated nature of the product. So that's the production cycle. And I think it's really important to understand that. I think like this first line, the forest into the milling, very well known. Manufacturing, you can imagine it. But this fabrication is really, really critical part of the mass timber value proposition because it does increase the efficiency of construction. And Ellie, if you find that people are typing in questions and it seems like it's a question that it would be good to answer before moving on, because otherwise the person asking it will have it stuck in their head and not be able to think about anything else, feel free to interrupt me. So we're excited about mass timber for a variety of different reasons, and I'm going to go through these fairly quickly because we don't have a huge amount of time today. But first, this idea that we want to build more sustainable buildings and more sustainable communities, right? When we build with wood, which is a renewable resource, we're already building more sustainably than we are if we're building with another type of material that is non-renewable. In addition, mass timber through the whole production cycle, sourcing all the way through when it goes into the building and potentially even after it's done being a building, but definitely up to the point where it's built into the building and is in the building, has a significantly lower carbon footprint for all of those parts of the life cycle, sourcing, manufacture, transportation, construction, all of that than do steel and concrete. So this is a way that we can increase sustainability. And of course, you all know this, wood stores carbon, right? Trees absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere during photosynthesis and convert it to carbon and just lock it up in their trunks, in their branches, in the roots, and then eventually in the soil too. And this carbon, when you harvest a tree and create a wood product, much of that carbon is retained in the wood. Wood by dry weight is 50% carbon. So we're really locking up a lot of carbon in these wood products, and mass timber is so large, we can lock up a lot of it. And so that's really powerful, because what we're doing is we're extending basically these carbon benefits of trees. And if we're doing our forestry in a really good way, that means that we're maybe harvesting the trees at a time when maybe their carbon sequestration cycle has slowed down because maybe they're getting a little bit older. There are ways to really optimize for that carbon storage and for forest health and resilience at the same time. We can also improve efficiency. I mentioned that mass timber is a prefabricated kit of parts, and this is where we can really improve the efficiency of our building construction times. So what we're seeing is, because of the panelized nature of these pieces, buildings can go up significantly faster. For example, we have a building on our campus, the STEM Teaching and Learning Facility. Some of you might have toured it with me at some point. That building is a mass timber and steel hybrid structure. And the construction team that built it tells us that if they had, this was the first mass timber building they built. They told us that if they had had the efficiencies at the start of the project that they had developed by the end through learning on the job, they would have built this building 4 to 8 weeks faster. And the fastness would be largely attributed to the efficiency of the mass timber. In addition, mass timber is very aesthetically pleasing, so you're not going to want to cover it up as much with some finishes like gypsum board. And it's also quite very fire resistant, and the fire resistance is built into the material. So you're not covering it up with fire protection either. So there's all these ways that you're saving time and money and materials when you're building with mass timber. Speaking of beautiful, I bet most of us here really enjoy being in buildings that are made of wood. We can build more beautiful buildings. We can build buildings that have the effect of biophilia on the building occupants. And biophilia simply means the idea that when humans are surrounded by environments where natural elements are present, they experience certain benefits. They might experience increased well-being, or they might have improved mental health. And we're even seeing higher levels of productivity in buildings where natural elements are present. Naturally, a new manufacturing industry can help us create new jobs, or developing new mass timber products, new wood products can bring new manufacturing opportunities. We're also seeing kind of new types of construction jobs related to installing mass timber, and of course, jobs on forests, if we're able to leverage mass timber as an opportunity to increase sustainable harvest on forest lands to achieve forest health and resilience. So all these different ways that we can create jobs and help revitalize a bunch of different types of economies, but in particular, rural forested ones. And then, of course, supporting resilient forests. As independent forest landowners, you know that managing your forests costs money. And if you can be drawing revenue from selling the product coming off of your forest that you're managing for forest health and resilience, then that's going to make it easier for you to continue to reinvest those dollars in the health and resilience of your forest. So here we are seeing the opportunity for a value-added product, mass timber, to help create that type of revenue opportunity to support healthy, resilient forests. Okay, so because of all these benefits, we're seeing mass timber adoption and production growing in the United States. So importantly, in the 1980s, before the 1980s, we had certain types of mass timber already in our building codes: nail laminated timber, glue laminated timber. These were around. With regard to glue laminated timber, we weren't using it at a gigantic scale. Now, when we were talking about glue lam as a mass timber product, we're talking about it at a much larger scale, but still, it's a technology that's been around for quite a long time. Then in the 1980s in Austria and Germany, cross-laminated timber, CLT, started to emerge commercially. This was game-changing, and it's this product that really led to the coining of the term mass timber, which simply means massive timber. In Germany, it's massive Holz, so very large wood, basically. And so that really led to the coining of this term. So about 40-ish years ago, cross-laminated timber emerged in Europe. Then we started in the US seeing interest in mass timber in the early 2010s, mostly in the Pacific Northwest, I would say, where we started seeing people wanting to build buildings with this, and in particular, driven by this desire to find a new value-added scalable product that could help create revenue to reinvest in forest health resilience management. So very important time in the US. And things started moving fast from there. So in 2015, the first US-made cross-laminated timber panels were certified, made by D.R. Johnson in Oregon. Then that next year, people were like, wow, we're starting to hear a lot of buzz about this. We should start bringing together. So the first International Mass Timber Conference was hosted in Oregon, and there were, I think, about 500 people in attendance at that. That has grown so much over the years. There's now about 4,000 people who attend that each year. That same year, 2016, the first tall mass timber high-rise was completed in the US. This was in Minneapolis. Not super tall, about 7 stories, and it's a building that used nail laminated timber and glue laminated timber. It didn't use cross-laminated timber there yet. But then we're starting to see some other milestones here. The first mass timber building in completed using those US-made cross-laminated timber panels. Then we're starting to see in 2018, the first multifamily, the first apartment buildings made of mass timber, over 6 stories. This is carbon 12, and also in Oregon, I think it's 8 stories. But then very quickly we escalated and we did what we love to do in the United States, make the biggest one. So in 2022 in Milwaukee, the Ascent Tower opened. This is a multifamily apartment building, and it's the tallest mass timber building in the world. It's a 7 stories concrete podium structure, and then there's 18 stories of mass timber on top of it. So really a important building in the kind of development of the mass timber economy in the United States. So kind of to just put that into a map, you can see this is how demand for mass timber buildings has been growing in the United States. You can see here that in 2018, there were just 439 projects that were either completed or in design or planning or under construction. And that increased by more than 6 times between 2018 and September of 2025 to almost 2,600 mass timber projects in various stages. Big increase, and we're continuing to see momentum growing all over the country. And just to be clear, this demand does not include single family homes. It includes commercial structures, institutional structures, multifamily, like apartment buildings. Single family homes are not captured here because mass timber is a little bit large scale for most single family homes. And we already build most of our houses out of wood in the United States anyway. So what about Michigan? Now let's kind of bring it home to Michigan. Why are we interested in mass timber in Michigan? Like, why is the Michigan DNR investing and collaborating on mass timber? Why has the legislature programmed some dollars to help build a mass timber ecosystem? Why is MSU working on this? Why are colleagues at Michigan Tech working on this? And this is the part, like, I don't need to tell you this. You know, we got a lot of trees. You know, and you know that we make stuff in Michigan. We have a really strong manufacturing and engineering culture. We have a need to kind of transition that or create new opportunities with new types of products all the time. You know, we've made cars, we make equipment, we make furniture, a lot of furniture out of wood. But we have a forest products industry that employs almost 42,000 people and contributes almost $27 billion annually to the economy. So here's another way to continue to add to that, you know, and revitalize it and kind of claim that for Michigan on an ongoing basis. And we definitely need to build, and we really need to build housing. We have a housing shortage of 190,000 units in the United States. And, you know, in order to close that gap, we'll be building single family homes, but in cities and, suburbs and communities where it makes sense, we need to build density housing. We need to build apartments, we need to build condominiums, and mass timber can be a really good way to build these buildings because it works well in buildings that have repeatable footprints. And the efficiency of building with it could mean that we could get people into this housing faster. So, but we also need to build other types of buildings too, right? Industrial buildings, schools, buildings on university campuses, government buildings, all the building types. And then finally, there is a policy reason in Michigan to do this, the My Healthy Climate Plan, the state's roadmap to achieving net zero carbon by 2050. Does mention mass timber 3 times as a tool in the state's toolkit to drive toward that goal. Again, because of what happens on forests, but also because of what happens in buildings, the ability to decarbonize our built environments. We also know that if we start manufacturing mass timber in Michigan, and we know this is based on a forest economics model that was created by Raju Pokharel, who's on the MSU Department of Forestry faculty, is a forest economist. We know that if we started making mass timber at a factory in Michigan, if we had an output of about 50,000 cubic meters per year, we'd start to see more than $150 million directly going into the GDP. Sorry, that it's indirect is 152, and then direct is almost 90 million. We'd see a bunch of new jobs. We'd see sales tax resulting from this. We'd see more state tax. So, important. And then if we doubled that output, it goes without saying, it would be more. So just an important note that there's real economic reasons and contributions to the state's economy for launching mass timber production here. So that's why the state of Michigan has been investing in a lot of different things related to mass timber in a variety of different ways. So I'm going to just show you a few of these and briefly describe how that's happening. So in 2025, the legislature allocated $1 million. So it's not a huge amount of money, but really acknowledging some of the work that was already happening and the momentum that's been growing, invested $1 million to continue to develop the mass timber industry in Michigan. It didn't give a lot of guidance about how to do that. So those dollars are being programmed through the Michigan Department of Natural Resources, and MassTimber at MSU has been collaborating to help decide kind of the best ways to invest those dollars in order to achieve the highest return on that investment. The state has invested about $750,000 in our program, MassTimber at MSU, especially to do this outreach and stakeholder engagement, to do the kinds of presentations I'm doing for you right now, to convene a technical assistance community, to do all these other things that we're doing that I'll talk a bit more about, but also to conduct some specific research, including a supply chain analysis and demand survey that I'll show you in a minute. The state has built a couple of buildings made of mass timber for a total value of $360 million. They built this wonderful building in Newberry that I mentioned before. I believe I have a specific slide on that in here, so I'm going to talk more about that later. And then they've built a new state laboratory building in Diamondale in the Lansing area using mass timber. And importantly, the state legislature helped facilitate an investment of about $30 million toward the construction of the MSU STEM teaching and learning facility, which was completed in July of 2021 and was only the second building in the state to use cross-laminated timber panels, and is still, but we're getting competition, which is great because that's what we want, still the kind of the biggest and most kind of prominent mass timber building in the state. But again, we're going to be passed soon. Okay. And Ellie, just checking in with you. Are we having any questions yet that I should answer now? Okay. So now I'm going to move into kind of what is MSU doing through MassTimber at MSU to help foster this mass timber ecosystem, to create more demand for mass timber and to help create the conditions that would result in mass timber production beginning to happen in Michigan. So first, we have the STEM teaching and learning facility, which I mentioned, and we really leverage that as a learning laboratory for all different types of groups and professionals and students and policymakers who are interested in mass timber. The primary audience for these tours, or the primary consumer of these tours, I guess, are people in the architecture, engineering, and construction industry whose clients are asking them to build mass timber buildings. And this is their first time doing that. So they want to come and see it. They want to look at it. They want to touch it. They want to like take pictures of how all the pieces come together and ask a lot of questions. So we've taken about, I think, 4,000 people on tours of this building since 2021. And it's fun to know, Georgia Peterson, if you're on this call, that the group that that MFA group that came through in 2021 was my first tour of this building. So it's nice to be back with MFA folks. Next, we are convening mass timber communities. We do this in a variety of different ways as well. We host events. We convene what we call the Michigan Mass Timber Community of Practice that I'll talk a little bit more about soon. We're hosting something in Detroit right now that's coming up, a little bit more information, but really finding ways for people to come together from all different sectors and learn together about mass timber to support each other and to develop, a peer learning community. And that's what this Michigan Mass Timber Community of Practice was designed to do. This is a quarterly virtual gathering that allows people to convene and hear basically a subject matter presentation and then ask questions about that topic. And then we have an hour of open office hours so people can bring any questions or any ideas that they have and bounce them around with the other people who are in attendance. Again, the goal here is, to provide people with access to information from MassTimber MSU, from Woodworks, from the American Wood Council, these more national, technically focused organizations, but more importantly, to begin to expand the knowledge base so we have a peer learning community where more and more people have more and more information. And then finally, we're implementing supportive initiatives, and I'll talk about some of those moving forward. So yeah, this is our the STEM teaching and learning facility. Here's some of the events that we host. So each year, we host the Michigan Mass Timber Update in collaboration with the Michigan DNR and Renewable Resource Solutions, as some of you might know. We consider this our annual celebration of Michigan mass timber momentum, and it is the place to go if you want to hear like a really little amount about a whole bunch of different things that are happening with mass timber. MFA's Nicole Frost presented this year. Her presentation was so well received. People were very interested in hearing about private land ownership, how that looks, some challenges that private forest landowners face, and some opportunities that might arise if we start really thinking about connecting private forest lands to mass timber production. Really a great presentation by Nicole, and I suggest that you look for this event each December. It happens in a different place each year. We also tend to organize a Michigan group to attend the International Mass Timber Conference in Portland, Oregon each year. This is the biggest mass timber conference in the world, and it's really important because all of the producers and anyone who's involved in the mass timber production cycle is part of the expo floor at this thing. And then there's wonderful content for days and days and days. So this is a great opportunity to kind of get out of town a little bit, connect with people from around the world, but also connect with people from Michigan who are engaged in mass timber. And then right now, I'm actually in Detroit right now because we're hosting an exhibition, Tall Timber, the Future of Cities in Wood. We really wanted to bring kind of like a retrospective, but up into the present of how did kind of mass timber get started in the United States? What did early innovation look like? And what's going on with mass timber in Michigan right now? So we're hosting this traveling exhibition in downtown Detroit through the end of February with a lot of different programming around it, panel discussions, special events, receptions, talks by leading mass timber architects. So this is a really fun way to kind of take a closer look at a lot of different things related to mass timber in one place. And I already talked about this, but if you're interested in joining the Michigan Mass Timber Community of Practice, please scan this QR code, and that will take you to a form where you can submit a request to join. And the next meeting is actually, this is going to be the only time probably do this. It's a hybrid meeting, so we're having in person at the exhibit that I just mentioned at 719 Griswold in Detroit. but also online. So if you fill out that form, you'll get the information. This one, we're going to talk about a technical design matter. It's going to be about how to consider fire safety in mass timber design. So we'll have a guest talking about that, but then we'll have, again, as usual, an hour of office hours on any topic. And then implementing supportive initiatives. So one of the things that I thought was really important was to create a program that would provide some incentive, financial incentive and technical support to early adopters of mass timber in Michigan. So working with DNR and the Michigan Green Building Collaborative and Woodworks, and using some of those funds that I mentioned earlier were allocated by the legislature in the 2025 fiscal year budget. We've launched the Michigan Mass Timber Catalyst Program. This is a competitive program where people who are in design phases of buildings that they want to be mass timber buildings could submit proposals. The proposal submission period already ended, and we're now in the evaluation phase of those proposals. But the selected projects will receive some funding, $20,000 to $75,000. So not a game-changing amount of funding, but this allows the project teams to have the time and some funding support to participate in a technical assistance cohort for a year and really help address any mass timber barriers that they're facing or questions or challenges that are coming up in their project, to have support to overcome them and hopefully successfully implement mass timber in their buildings. This is a really exciting program, and it applies to projects statewide. Okay. So now I just want to show you a few of the mass timber projects that are completed in Michigan. I'm not going to go through all of them, but here's a nice project. It's a community center based in Detroit. It's called the A.B. Ford Community Center. It's right on the riverfront, and it uses cross-laminated timber panels. You can see those in the ceilings, and there are some glue-laminated timber columns and beams present in this design as well. It is a hybrid steel and mass timber structure. And this building is really cool because it became a mass timber project because as a result of kind of like a really intensive community engagement effort by the architecture team and by the city of Detroit, who is the client for this project. And when they were talking to members of the community about what would make this an appealing space for them to use, what types of features would they like to be present, they said they wanted it to reflect the natural elements of Michigan. So water, well, that's easy because the river's right here. And if you have nice windows, you can kind of engage with the water, but also wood and forests. And so that's how the decision to use mass timber came to pass for this building. There's a really wonderful veterinary clinic in Westland in the Detroit area. It's a suburb of Detroit that decided to use mass timber because they thought that it would create a beautiful and relaxing environment for people and pets when they come in. I mean, you almost never go to the vet when it's not a stressful situation. So let's create a beautiful building with some biophilic benefits for that context. Vineyard View. This is in Sutton's Bay, so in Grand Traverse area. This is a hybrid mass timber and stick built fourplex. I couldn't think of how to say fourplex. I was trying to say quadruplex, and then I think not a word. A fourplex, so townhouse style, and this is attainable housing. So it's not market rate housing. So this is kind of the first mass timber project in the more affordable and attainable housing space in Michigan. The cool thing about this one, it's developed by Homestretch Housing. So if you live in that area, you might be familiar with this nonprofit housing developer. They have the bug and they want to make more like this. So they're using this as a model, but then they're also working on some larger projects as well with mass timber. In Kalamazoo, we've got the K-RISA Career Connect campus. Similar to the A.B. Ford Community Center, this became a mass timber building through a community engagement process with students and parents whose kids might use this building in the future or who were doing kind of career technical education at the time. They were asked what they wanted, and they said, we want it to feel like a forest. We want it to feel like a place with nature. And so the architects worked on implementing a mass timber hybrid design in this incredible building, which houses like all of these different technical education subjects like auto shop and veterinary and like medical tech and construction, culinary, just an incredible array of things happen here. And then this project will probably be the most interesting to you. This is the Michigan Department of Natural Resources Customer Service Center in Newberry. I've mentioned it a couple of times, and maybe some of you have gone to see it. It's a great building. It opened, I think like last January of 2025-ish. And it's an extremely important building in Michigan. It's a strong demonstration of DNR's leadership to advance mass timber. So this building was in design for quite a long time. Like the development phase of this took a long time due to like COVID and some other like cost of construction rising across the board. But always it was envisioned as a mass timber project. There was a really strong commitment to doing this project as a mass timber project. And not only that, there was a desire to do it with domestically produced mass timber. And not only that, there was a desire, a very strong desire to use Michigan wood in the mass timber, which was a huge challenge because during the design of this project, there were no mass timber products available that were made from Michigan wood. So they had to work, the design team led by Lord Axe Sargent and the construction management team led by Walbridge had to work really hard with a manufacturer who was willing to create a new cross-laminated timber panel product made from Michigan wood. Now, all mass timber products currently certified in the United States are made from softwood species. In Michigan, as you certainly know, we're 70% hardwoods and 30% softwoods. And, you know, in Michigan, we don't have things like Douglas fir, we don't have southern yellow pine. We have like spruce pine fir south group, so that's red pine, some spruces and some other stuff. So what the decision was made to use Michigan red pine to source that wood from a mill in Michigan, from Buer Lumber, to have it milled here and then shipped all the way to Washington State to Vaughan Timbers, a cross-laminated timber manufacturer, who was going to do the research and development, product testing, and certification of these cross-laminated timber panels to successfully bring them to market, then manufacture the ones that were needed to go into this building. So that's what happened. Now, that's not the most efficient value chain. You're not always going to want to send your wood across the country and then have it sent back to you in another form. However, in the case of this project and the impact of this project, super important and worth doing, right? Because what we've done is we've demonstrated and had certified a product made from Michigan wood. So now anybody else who might wish to make mass timber closer to home using Michigan red pine knows that it's already certified and that they can do it. So DNR effectively de-risked Michigan red pine in mass timber by doing the building in this way. So a very exciting project, really important. And if you're in the UP and haven't seen it yet, I absolutely recommend it. It's really wonderful. And in these pictures, you can see this panel that I'm drawing a circle around with my cursor now. That's a Michigan red pine cross-laminated timber panel. It's very knotty, as you would expect. And then there's these columns and beams in the building that are actually more clear. That's made of Douglas fir from Washington. They made only the cross-laminated timber panels out of the red pine so far. But we're really starting to see a lot more demand in Michigan, right? In 2021, when MSU's STEM Teaching and Learning Facility opened, I mentioned we were only the second building in the state to use cross-laminated timber. There were some around using glue-laminated timber at this large scale, not that many. We now have at least 65 mass timber projects in Michigan that are in various stages of design, planning, construction, or completion. You can see that they're spread pretty widely across the state, across both peninsulas. And they're all different types of buildings. You can see the list on the left hand of your screen. So kind of like this geographic diversity and the project type diversity tells me that all different types of people and all different types of places building all different types of buildings are seeing something that they really like about mass timber and moving ahead with these projects. Okay, how are we doing? Any questions yet, Ellie?
So far in the Q&A, you've got a anonymous posting that goes, Oceana County Parks with cooperation of the Road Commission just finished building a timber bridge at Marshville Dam County Park. The lifespan is going to be 100 years. The bridge will carry a load of any interstate highway steel bridge. So that's pretty cool.
That is extremely cool. And whoever wrote that, I would love, Ellie, maybe you can respond with my email address in there. I would
Mm-hmm.
love for someone to send me some information about that bridge. That's really exciting. We had a webinar a couple of months ago as part of our Michigan MassTimber community of practice, all about using MassTimber in bridges, and the opportunities were really exciting. And I didn't know that much about those applications myself, so it's nice to hear about this new one in Michigan. As with all new kind of technologies that there's kind of an impetus for a variety of social reasons to advance, policies, supportive policies can help. I mentioned some early stuff that's happening in Michigan. First, I mentioned the My Healthy Climate Plan. The city of Lansing has done something similar in its sustainability action plan, saying like MassTimber is one way of kind of is a tool in that toolkit. The Ann Arbor Public Schools have taken on a very important leadership role that's been effective. This school district has been specifying for MassTimber in requests for proposals for design teams for new schools in this district. As a result, it has 7 different MassTimber hybrid schools that are in design, planning, and construction. So they've really been true to kind of this idea that they want to build their schools using this material for a variety of sustainability and also probably like biophilia reasons. In April of this year, Michigan's building code was updated to include 3 new types of MassTimber buildings that now allow us to build with MassTimber up to 18 stories under the code. The city of East Lansing in November of 2024 adopted the first of its kind in Michigan kind of zoning ordinance. It's a developer incentive. So it enables, like if you were a developer and you wanted to make a building, say in downtown East Lansing zone, and you decided you want it to be a MassTimber building, you would earn points for doing that. And then you as a developer could spend those points on things that make your project pencil out better. So for example, if you choose MassTimber, the city might allow you to use your points to build more stories on your building, which gives you more rentable units in an apartment complex, for example. So that's an exciting incentive. And our program, MassTimber at MSU, has been involved in almost all of these, in the design and implementation of almost all of these. Ann Arbor did it totally on their own. Let's skip that. Okay, and now I'm going to start talking a little bit about some of the research and teaching we're doing through MassTimber at MSU, but I'm going to go through it pretty quickly because I really want to focus on our supply chain analysis and kind of help you think a little bit about what that might mean for you and the forests you own in the future. But we've got a broad kind of and diverse group of affiliated faculty with our program, MassTimber at MSU, people in construction management, in forestry, in ag, food, and resource economics, in packaging, and then in civil and environmental engineering. So this is a really interdisciplinary effort at MSU. In construction management, we have a large portfolio of different types of research projects that help the construction industry gain insights about how to adopt MassTimber, as well as how to engage and train workers across this space. We're also working on product development and implementation. I think a couple of things that will be really interesting to you are this idea that how can we use undervalued species in Michigan for locally made MassTimber? One thing that people are always asking is, can you use jack pine in MassTimber? And the answer is yes. It's part of spruce pine fir south, I think. And if I'm wrong about that, somebody please correct me. But it is a species that can be used in MassTimber. The way we manage it in Michigan, for Kirtland's warbler habitat is super important, but it results in kind of these like spindly, small diameter, brushy things that are trying to move into product value chains. It's interesting to think about how engineered wood products might provide value-added use cases for that type of wood. And then we're also at MSU through the laboratory of Dr. Mojgan Najad developing and testing and starting to move to commercialization adhesives and coatings and foams made from lignin instead of being made from fossil fuels. And lignin, you probably know, is a waste product of forest management, and of agriculture. So how can we create a biodegradable, totally, bio-generated adhesive to put into a mass timber product so the whole product is biodegradable? And then education and training for workforces, as I mentioned before, architecture, engineering, construction management, and installation. So a lot of research going on. And we also have students at all levels from a variety of different majors who are engaged in mass timber from their own disciplines. Okay, now this is the part that I think, now you've had a whole bunch of context that I think is very important for you to have, but this part might be of most interest to you. So with funding from the Michigan Department of Natural Resources, our Mass Timber at MSU team led a supply chain analysis that's actually ongoing, and that's led by Dr. Raju Pokharel, as well as a demand survey in the Great Lakes led by Dr. Emily Silver, who I know you're very familiar with at MFA. I'm only going to focus on the supply chain part of this, or the supply analysis part of this, because I already gave you some insights about demand in Michigan and throughout the United States. And when I present on the supply chain analysis, I don't do a very deep dive because it's not my research and I am not a forest economist. So just know that it might be a little bit of a high level. But kind of what underpins the why did we do this research, right? We know that the construction industry in the US is undergoing a major transformation. And in order to transition to mass timber, and particularly to be able to transition to mass timber in a regional way in Michigan and the Great Lakes region, we really need to understand the supply and demand projections. And one thing that people are always asking, particularly about softwoods in Michigan and in the Great Lakes region, is there enough softwood available to make mass timber at all from regional wood? And is there enough wood to do that in a way that's sustainable from a forest health and resilience perspective? So we've got some charts on the right. Michigan absolutely is leading mass timber momentum in the Midwest. So that's why so much focus on this here. Okay. So now this is important for you to know, where the heck is mass timber being made in North America? So you can see that there's some clusters, right? We've got kind of the Pacific Northwest and then kind of like Northwest moving toward the Pacific, but a little more inland here in Montana. We got mass timber being made of southern yellow pine here in the US Southeast. In Chibougamau, Quebec, there's mass timber being made of black spruce. And then in the Great Lakes region, we've got some stuff, nothing in Michigan yet. We've got a cross-laminated timber panel manufacturer in Illinois. They're mostly currently using southern yellow pine, so from the south, and haven't yet been commercializing regional wood, but they did recently have certified spruce pine fir south, which includes red pine and some other species we have in Michigan. So now they're going to be able to start making their panels from those species. And then there's a larger manufacturer here in St. Thomas, Ontario, which is pretty close to say Lansing. It's about probably like a 2-hour drive. Here they're making cross-laminated timber, glue-laminated timber, primarily using black spruce. But like Sterling, they have also been working recently on certifying spruce pine fir south because they know that there's a lot of interest in using that material in Michigan markets where they're getting quite a lot of business. So that's kind of what's going on with manufacture. So our supply analysis wanted to kind of think about, great, there's a gap around manufacturing in our region. Nobody's manufacturing mass timber here yet. And so we wanted to look at, if somebody was interested in manufacturing mass timber in Michigan, what's the feedstock availability? Who's going to be buying their stuff? Like, if they make it, where are they going to be shipping it to? What are the demand locations? And what's the transportation cost associated both with getting the wood from the forest or the mill to the production facility, and then getting the finished product to where it's going to be turned into a building? So those are the main variables that we were looking at. It's not like we're not looking at every variable. We're looking at those 3 main variables. We modeled 2 factories, each producing 50,000 cubic meters of mass timber per year, one that would open hypothetically in 2023. It didn't. And then another that would open in 2027. And we looked at two different ways of supplying the MassTimber, two different supply models. So first, looked at secondary manufacturing. So a MassTimber factory that is buying milled lumber that's been kilned already. That's their feedstock. They're using that to make these panels and columns and beams. And we also looked at a vertically integrated supply model. So where the MassTimber manufacturer would be using whole logs and milling and kilning those before moving them directly into manufacturing in their own site. So two different types of models. And we looked at several different feedstock spatial models, meaning where's the wood coming from, right, geographically. So we looked at what if all the wood came from Michigan? What if all the wood came from the Great Lakes region more broadly? And then what if the wood was sourced from all over the United States? So these are the different spatial models that we wanted, thinking about, it's really important if you're going to be making a big investment to produce MassTimber, you want a sustainable feedstock supply. And so what does that look like from a variety of different sources? So the researchers used the LURA model, the land utilization and resource allocation model, as their tool to conduct the to basically do the modeling, plug in all the variables, say like, now go analyze. This is the model that they used, looking at all of these different FIA forested plots and looking at a forest products market representation for demand that looks like that. So this is kind of like a lot of data that I cannot talk you through in great detail, but it's important to know. Then they started wondering, like, where would you locate it? So they looked at 180 different kind of points where a MassTimber production facility might be located in Michigan. Continued to do that. And then they came up with, based on their analysis of in the models that they created and based on those variables that I shared, that the two primary locations could be based on, really it's mostly based on cost and feedstock availability and then proximity to demand centers. Remember that. One is Menominee here in the UP, I call this the foot of the bunny, the jumping bunny in the UP. And then here in the Detroit metropolitan area, and there are a lot of reasons for this, right? So the idea is that it wants to economically optimize the distance and cost of procuring saw logs or lumber or access to cities. So then it starts looking at different supply scenarios for secondary manufacturing, again, where the factory's buying milled lumber that's already been kilned from some sawmill, whether it's across, and this is all looking all across the US for sourcing that type of lumber. And it finds that it would be more expensive to use this model in the Upper Peninsula than in the Lower Peninsula. Then it looks at the secondary manufacturing model getting wood from forests across the US, but only using sawmills based in Michigan. And again, more expensive in the UP, a little bit less expensive to do this in the Lower Peninsula. And then now we start looking at that vertically integrated model where we're getting saw logs, and the saw logs are coming from forests from across the country and going into a MassTimber facility in Michigan. Here we start to see the cost shift. So in the UP, this is significantly less expensive than it is in the Lower Peninsula, right? Because they're able to start sourcing these logs from pretty close by in Wisconsin, maybe moving out into Minnesota. It's a little bit harder to source those logs, softwood logs, at a location in the Detroit area, right? Because now we're starting to move into hardwood territory down here. And then I think this is the last one. This vertically integrated model looks at sourcing from forests in Michigan only, and then also having the sawmills be located only in Michigan. This is more expensive in the UP, right? Because the softwood, you can really access it over here. But then in the Lower Peninsula, it's possible to start getting some softwoods from like over here in the Western Michigan. and maybe even a little bit closer kind of toward the thumb. So this is what they found. So they found that, sorry, I'm just making sure I understand what this says. Then they started to look at what if we were sourcing hardwoods. This research is not quite complete yet, but just know that this is something that's in process because hardwood, again, as I said, it comprises the vast majority of the trees that we have in Michigan. We have such a strong need to find new markets for underused hardwoods, given the decline in paper industry and some other industries. Mass timber can be an opportunity for that. Importantly, Michigan Tech is doing a lot of great research and development, trying to understand what are the optimal layups and species mixes for Michigan hardwoods. And there's movement toward getting hardwoods into the correct certifications to make it possible to commercialize them. We're not quite there yet, but we are going to be looking at modeling the same types of things we modeled for softwoods for hardwoods. So the main things that we've learned through this process of doing this supply chain analysis, we've got a lot of softwood in the region, even though the ratio is in favor of hardwoods. For a mass timber production facility, it's going to be important to focus on untapped feedstocks. One of the things we sometimes hear from the commercial mills, the large commercial software mills in Michigan is like, oh, for the land that we're accessing from, we are already milling what we have for existing markets. We need to kind of increase the availability of feedstock. And so there's like two different ways of doing that. One is to open up the door to harvesting smaller diameter trees that can be, replaced, and with succession planting of these trees, start harvesting those maybe a little earlier and using those in mass timber because you can, and also looking at opportunities to increase harvest from private land. So how can, as I said at the beginning, supplying lumber, excuse me, from private lands to mass timber production, how can that be a revenue source to help landowners, forest landowners like you, have more access to revenue to manage your forest lands? We have some ideas about what types of products might be interesting to focus on, just given gaps in the marketplace, and then those locations. And we also learned that the vertically integrated model is more cost-effective and kind of economically sustainable for both facilities in Michigan, which I think we were a little surprised. I think a lot of people were saying, oh, we're probably going to be seeing more secondary manufacture, but what we're seeing is that it might actually be more economically feasible to do a vertically integrated model. So what's next? We're going to be looking at how can we increase softwood lumber production capacity in Michigan? What about sourcing feedstock from other areas of the country? How does that affect the economic viability of a producer? And what about mixing softwood and hardwood into our supply chain? So with that, I think I just want to note that, there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of interest in Michigan to launch mass timber production here. We're not there yet, but our supply chain analysis and our demand trends do demonstrate that there are a lot of good reasons to make mass timber in Michigan. I think it's going to be really important that we're thinking about how is the Michigan manufacture of mass timber different from what's happening in the Pacific Northwest and different from what's happening in the South, both due to the species that we have, the technologies that will work with those species, and the types of demand that we have, the different building types and contexts that we might have. So let's think about how we tailor this to Michigan. And then finally, of course, opportunities to bring together and aggregate feedstock logs from private forest landowners while creating, a revenue stream for those private forest landowners to manage your forests for health and resilience. So I think there's a lot of opportunities. There's so much to discuss about what types of models can help facilitate that. But that's what I have for you today. And I'll always be happy to come back and talk again another time. And I think we have time for like one half of a question, if there are any.